Hello there, and hello there. I'm Danny Gregory, and I am conducting a bit of an experiment, which is that I wanted to tell you about my weekly essay, which I write every week, and I want to tell you about the one that I sent out today because I thought you might find it interesting. I've been getting a lot of feedback from people who thought it was interesting and inspiring to them. And I also wanted to test a technical thing, which is I'm live streaming to YouTube and to Substack, which is where my essay resides. So I thought, let's just chat with both of you and see how it goes, okay? So I'm going to read you the text of my essay. And I'm going to show you a few pictures that go along with it. And then if you happen to have any comments or anything like that I can see, I'm not sure that I'll be able to get comments, but if I can get comments, I will gladly answer comments, or if not, weekend. So, all right. So this essay that I wrote is called "We All Come from Survivors." We all come from survivors. And it's an essay that I wrote originally a few years ago, and I've kind of gone back and reread it and revisited and thought about it some more and tweaked it a bit. And in part because I thought about all the ways that the world has changed since I wrote it. It seems like the world is constantly changing these days. But how my attitude towards life and the story that I'm going to tell you has remained pretty much the same. And the reason is pretty simple. It's all due to the lives of two people who you may never have met, but whose example I think will bring you wisdom and comfort today, even though they are long gone. So I'm going to just read you from this essay, and let's see how it goes. Let me tell you a story. It's about what changes. All right, let me start all over again. Let me tell you a story. It's about what change sounds like when it's kicking down your door, and what you do about it when it does. Herman was 4 years old when his country plunged into the war to end all wars. World War I continued to rage on till he was 9, a boy too small to fight or even understand the causes and implications of the destruction all around him. But he soon felt the fallout. After losing the military war, Germany was savaged by an economic one. Inflation rocketed to historic levels. It was a terrible time for even a canny entrepreneur. And Herman's father was born to lose, even in the best of times. He invested the family's nest egg, equivalent to $10,000, in a warehouse full of burlap sacks. And then he turned around and resold it at a handsome profit. His buyer was supposed to pay him by day's end, but he stalled. By the time he showed up 2 days later with the cash, a literal wheelbarrow full, the millions of marks would scarcely buy a loaf of day-old bread. The family was ruined. Herman and his siblings were sent door to door through the ghetto, hawking whatever wares their father scrounged together. When his older brother Joseph rang an unfamiliar doorbell and discovered it was a classmate's home, he dropped his bag of mantel clocks and ran in humiliation. No amount of beating would get him back out to sell again. But Herman persevered, hustling, supporting his family however he could, knowing no one else would ever come along to bail them out. In high school, Herman had shown himself to be exceptional. He was clearly smarter and harder working than any of his classmates. His dream was to go to medical school and then to study with Sigmund Freud and become a psychiatrist. It was a preposterous ambition for an underfed boy from the shtetl, but he stubbornly pursued it nonetheless. By the time he completed his studies, The Nazis had decreed that a Jew could not practice medicine, and he could not receive a doctorate. In fact, they announced Jews should leave Germany altogether, or else. While the getting was still good, Hermann went to a relocation office to register for exile. In a long line, he met a lovely young woman from Cologne. Kate said that she too planned to be a doctor. He told her he'd heard that Jews were still permitted to study medicine in Rome, and that if she was interested, he would remain in line and send her the necessary information and paperwork. She gave him her address, thanked him, and left. Not long after, the Nazis arrested Hermann as a political activist. He spent 6 weeks in prison until his father was able to get him released. A pair of SS officers stopped Hermann on a train, demanded his papers, and said that he was under arrest. After some deliberation, they told him that red tape meant they couldn't arrest him on the train, but that he should continue on to his home and turn himself in to the local authorities to be arrested there. Hermann got off at the next stop and secreted himself away on the next train to Italy. In Rome, dead broke, he began studying medicine again. From the beginning, in Italian. He survived on a single herring a day and water from the Trevi fountain. One day he met Kate again. She had made it to Rome and was still lovely. In 1936, they exchanged cheap gold wedding rings in City Hall and then exchanged them again with the authorities for steel rings that were inscribed Oro alla Patria. The fascist government mandated that all gold items be turned in to fund the war effort. Soon after they finished their studies again, the Italians decided that they didn't welcome Jews anymore, and they had all to leave the Patria, pronto. Hermann and Kate looked for somewhere, anywhere to flee. Their families had all left Germany for Palestine, but Hermann was pretty sure that he had a cousin who owed him money and had emigrated to India. So he booked passage on an eastbound ship, assuring Kate that he would find a haven and send for her once she finished her studies. He never did track down his cousin or the money that he was owed, but India seemed like a safe place for a pair of young doctors, and so he sent for his wife. After visiting all the major cities in India, they decided to set up a practice in Lahore, ministering to British expats, and gave their babies English names. Hazel was born in 1939, and the next year, Michael. 1,000 miles from the chaos of war in Europe, the little family breathed a sigh of relief. One morning, Hermann opened the door to several armed British soldiers holding manacles, 4 pairs, including 2 for the babies. The family was arrested for being from a hostile country, enemies of the crown, Germans, and they were transported north to a prison camp. There, Hermann and Kate were assigned to be the camp doctors and ordered to treat their fellow prisoners, German spies and Nazi sympathizers. They began frantically writing letters to anybody who might give them asylum, to Palestine, to the USA, anywhere, but to no avail. Even when the war officially ended, they and their children remained behind barbed wire for a total of 7 years. When they were finally released, stateless and without passports, they returned to Lahore. More upheaval. A civil war between the Hindus and the Muslims cracked India in two. Thousands died and millions were displaced as Lahore became a part of a new Islamic country, Pakistan. Hermann and Kate, along with their family, stayed on in Lahore. They worked hard, constantly updating their lab and their surgery with the most up-to-date equipment shipped from the West. they became pillars of the community, treating ministers and film stars. Herman was elected president of the Rotary and then became the Grand Master of all Pakistani Freemasons. He wore custom suits and owned 40 pairs of handmade shoes. Kate bought her frocks in London and wore an armful of gold bangles. They had a large medical staff, a butler, cooks, and 2 gardeners. Their chauffeur drove them in a Mercedes-Benz, and they sent their children to a British boarding school. In the 1960s, the German government reinstated their citizenships, made an official declaration of apology to them, and held a ceremony in their honor in Oberhausen, the hometown that Herman had fled after his encounter with those SS officers so many years before. Then war broke out on their doorstep again. Their home was just a dozen miles from the Indian border, and as Pakistan and India locked horns and East Pakistan became Bangladesh, Herman and Kate felt compelled to pack up their belongings once more and depart for Israel. They bought a home in Jerusalem among their people at last. A year later, on Yom Kippur, they heard air raid sirens and ran down to their shelter, war again. But this time, they wouldn't be going anywhere. Kate succumbed to dementia in her 80s, and Herman died in his favorite armchair at 98. They're still in Jerusalem, buried side by side on Mount Olive, waiting for the Messiah's trumpet to sound. My grandparents' lives were marked by constant change, none of it their doing. But every time the deck was reshuffled, they survived and thrived. I never heard them curse their luck or complain about a lot. They weathered all types of persecution and unforeseen calamities, yet they never gave up, always seeking new solutions and ways to make the most of their changed circumstances. But it wasn't easy. I'm sure they must have worried terribly. Of course they did. Herman became increasingly reactionary as he got older, suspicious of Palestinians, of Soviets, of liberals, and intolerant of anybody who was different. He saw anti-Semitism all around, and who could blame him after all that he'd endured? Kate's children ended up living on the other side of the planet, marrying Gentiles, pulling away, leaving her feeling isolated. She never practiced medicine after they emigrated to Israel, but she became a housewife. She, who had once been served by a dozen servants. Despite all their years abroad, she enjoyed pottering around in her own kitchen, nostalgic for the days when she was still a Fraulein in her happy, tidy, middle-class German home. When I lie awake at night and I worry about all the things that could go wrong, medical, financial, political, what have you, I remember all that Herman and Kate survived, how even when things were scariest, they pulled through. They lived through a century of rupturing change, lived and flourished. And when I suffer some piddling setback, I think of Herman sitting down to study medicine all over again, in a language he didn't speak, a meager herring in his belly, fascists all around. When I worry about madmen shooting up shopping malls, I think of how my grandparents felt every time tanks rolled past their gates or jets flew overhead. When I get annoyed at the bank or the DMV, I think of how Gran felt when the SS stopped to paw through his papers. When I felt anxious about my son moving 3,000 miles away to start a life in California, I thought of how they felt when their families disappeared into the fog of World War II behind the gates of Auschwitz. Don't get me wrong, the fact that many of their trials were greater than mine doesn't wipe away my worries, and it doesn't trivialize them either. But it does serve to remind me that I come from hardy, resilient stock. I am descended from survivors. And when you think about it, we all are. Whether we know it or not, the world has faced far worse than we do today, our new fears notwithstanding. We are free from famine, plague, genocide, and though the world remains a troubled place, it's still a beautiful one too. And we can decide how we will see things, how we will cope with change, and how we will survive. We are free to choose to live each day as if we were going to make it through whatever comes up, firm in the belief that we are going to survive to die in our favorite armchairs many years from now. That's the text of my essay. If you're interested in my family story, my mother recently published her wonderful memoir, which is called A House in Lahore, and it's available on Amazon. I'll put a link to that. And also, Hina Ali is currently finishing up a documentary called Salam Shalom that is a story of my family's life, and you can find more information about that below as well. So that is what I wrote this week, what I write every week, something along, not these lines, all kinds of things I write about. Being a creative person and being an artist and life in general. And, if you would like to if you don't get my essays and you'd like to get them, Danny'sEssays.com. You can just sign up. They're free. I'll send you the next one next Friday. All right. Well, thanks very much for being here. A couple of people are making comments here. Creative Mindful Life says, please tell me that you illustrated parts of your mom's book. I'm enjoying your family tree chat, knowing we will survive just about anything. I did not illustrate her book. It is richly illustrated with photographs from our family archives, though. So you can see it there, and there's lots of good stuff. All right, thank you. So as I said, this was an experiment to see. Let me know how you feel about my reading these essays to you. Would you like it? Is it a waste of time? Would you rather read the essay yourself? Would you rather, I don't know, do something else with your time? You tell me, and I will consider that when I'm thinking about new things to share with you, because that's what I love to do, is to share ideas and art and things that I make and so forth. So, all right, have a great day, have a great weekend. And if you'd like to join me tomorrow, feels like I'm not usually on all the time, but I happen to be a lot on this month because of Inktober. And tomorrow we are going to do the next prompt in the Inktober thing. What is the next prompt? The next prompt is Inferno. So if you'd like to join us for Inferno, stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll let you know. Thanks again, bye, and have a lovely day.